She stood in the county clerk's office with an eviction notice in one hand and a letter about an inheritance in the other, trying to understand how her dead grandmother's abandoned honey farm could save her when she didn't even know her grandmother had owned a honey farm. But 6 weeks later, the struggling paramedic who could barely afford groceries would discover that the collapsing apiary wasn't just shelter. Hidden in the Queen's chamber, behind 40 years of untouched honeycombs, was a $475 million secret that would change everything. The fluorescent lights in Station 34's break room flickered the way they always did around 2 a.m. Rachel Morrison sat alone at the SCAR table, her paramedic uniform still damp with sweat from the last call, a cardiac arrest that hadn't made it. She was 36 years old and felt 60. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to eat cold Chinese food from a container that was 3 days old because fresh food cost money she didn't have. Her phone buzzed. A text from her daughter. "Mama, the heat's not working again. It's cold." Rachel checked the time. 2:17 a.m. Lily was 10 years old and shouldn't be awake, shouldn't be texting about broken heaters, shouldn't have to worry about things like that. But when your mother works overnight shifts and your apartment is falling apart and there's nobody else, you learn to worry young. "Bundle up, baby. I'll fix it when I get home in the morning." Rachel typed back, knowing she had no idea how to fix a heater and no money to call someone who did. The landlord, Mr. Chun, had made it clear that maintenance requests weren't his priority. He wanted his rent, which was already 2 months overdue. The eviction notice sat in her locker. 30 days. That's all she had. 30 days to come up with $2,400 in back rent plus next month's $1,200, or she and Lily would be on the street. She'd already sold everything worth selling. Her car was a 2004 Honda with 230,000 miles that burned oil. Her furniture came from thrift stores. She worked 60-hour weeks between the ambulance service and weekend shifts at the urgent care clinic and still fell short every single month. The math was simple and brutal. Rent, utilities, food, Lily's school supplies, the medication for Rachel's asthma that insurance only partially covered. It added up to more than she made. Every month, she fell further behind. Every month, the hole got deeper. Her partner, Tom, stuck his head in the break room. "We got another call. Possible overdose on 5th Street. Rachel stood, shoving the food container in the trash. She'd lost her appetite anyway. The shift ended at 7 a.m. Rachel drove home through the gray morning light, past neighborhoods that looked as tired as she felt. Her apartment was in a complex that had been affordable housing 20 years ago and was now just barely housing. The parking lot had potholes big enough to swallow tires. Half the exterior lights were broken. The playground equipment was rusted and dangerous. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her legs aching. Inside apartment 312, Lily was asleep on the couch, wrapped in every blanket they owned. The heater had died completely during the night. Rachel could see her breath in the air. She covered Lily with her own jacket, then stood in the kitchenette trying to figure out breakfast. Half a box of cereal, no milk. 2 eggs, 3 slices of bread. She could make Lily toast and eggs, send her to school with a full stomach. Rachel would skip breakfast. She was used to it. While the eggs cooked, she opened the mail she grabbed from the box downstairs. Bills, a credit card offer she'd never qualify for, and a cream-colored envelope with a law firm's return address. Whitmore & Associates, attorneys at law, Cedar Springs, Oregon. Rachel almost threw it away. Lawyers meant problems she couldn't afford. But something made her open it. "Dear Ms. Morrison, we are writing to inform you of an inheritance from your maternal grandmother, Dorothy Chun, who passed away on September 3rd of this year. As the sole surviving heir, you are entitled to receive the property known as Chun Honey Farm, located at 4700 Old Mill Road, Cedar Springs, Oregon, comprising approximately 15 acres and all structures thereon. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange transfer of the deed. No debts are attached to the property. All property taxes have been paid through the end of this year. Sincerely, Robert Whitmore, attorney at law." Rachel read it 3 times. Dorothy Chun, her grandmother. But Rachel's mother had died when Rachel was 3 years old. She had no memories of her, barely any photographs. Her father had raised her alone and never spoke about his late wife's family. When Rachel asked, he'd say, "That's all behind us now." He'd died of a heart attack when Rachel was 19, taking whatever family history he knew to his grave. She never heard anyone mention a grandmother named Dorothy Chun, never knew she existed. And now she was dead, leaving Rachel a honey farm. Rachel pulled out her laptop. The screen cracked from when she dropped it 6 months ago, but still functional. She searched Chun Honey Farm, Cedar Springs, Oregon. Google Maps showed a location about 4 hours north. Satellite view revealed buildings, fields, and what might be rows of hives, though the imagery was grainy and clearly old. She searched for obituaries. Found one. Dorothy Chun, 87, of Cedar Springs, passed peacefully on September 3rd. A lifelong beekeeper and honey producer, Dorothy operated Chun Honey Farm for over 50 years. She is survived by her granddaughter, Rachel Morrison. Private services were held. Rachel stared at the screen. A granddaughter the obituary mentioned, as if everyone knew. But Rachel hadn't known. Nobody had told her this woman existed. Nobody had invited her to the funeral. Lily shuffled into the kitchen, wrapped in a blanket like a burrito. "Mama, why is it so cold?" "Heater broke, baby. I'll get it fixed today." Another lie. Rachel turned back to the eggs, trying to focus. "You want toast with these? Are we going to have to move again?" Rachel's chest tightened. Lily had already moved 3 times in her short life. Each apartment slightly worse than the last. Each neighborhood slightly more run down, following the downward trajectory of Rachel's financial stability. "Not if I can help it, baby." But even as she said it, she knew the eviction was coming. They'd be in a shelter by Christmas. And then what? How do you work 60-hour weeks when you're living in a shelter? How do you keep your daughter safe, fed, in school? After dropping Lily at the bus stop, Rachel sat in her car and called the number on the lawyer's letter. A receptionist answered on the second ring. "Whitmore and Associates." "Hi, my name is Rachel Morrison. I received a letter about an inheritance from Dorothy Chun." "One moment, please." "Hold music. Classical." Tinny threw her phone speaker. Rachel watched the other parents driving away in cars that weren't held together with rust and prayer. "Ms. Morrison, this is Robert Whitmore." The voice was warm, grandfatherly. "Thank you for calling. I've been trying to reach you for several weeks. I just got the letter yesterday. I didn't know I had a grandmother." "Yes, Dorothy mentioned that might be the case. It's a complicated family history. But regardless, the property is yours. Free and clear, no mortgage, no liens. I have the deed ready for your signature. What kind of property is it? Is it livable?" There was a pause. "The farm has been unoccupied for approximately 15 years. Dorothy lived there until her health declined, then moved to a care facility. The buildings are structurally sound, but they'll need work. The honey operation shut down decades ago. Most of the hives are empty or collapsed. So, it's abandoned. Essentially, yes. But the land is valuable. 15 acres in Cedar Springs, even with neglected buildings, could sell for $200,000 to $300,000. That would certainly provide you with some financial relief. Financial relief. The understatement of the century. $200,000 would pay off every debt, give her a cushion, let her breathe for the first time in years. "When can I come sign the papers?" "I'm available this Friday if that works for you." Rachel calculated rapidly. She was off this Friday. She could make the drive, sign the papers, see the property, maybe meet with a realtor, get listed immediately. "I'll be there." That Friday, Rachel borrowed her neighbor's car, a slightly less decrepit sedan, and drove north. Lily came with her, excited about a road trip, about missing school, about the adventure of it all. Rachel didn't tell her they were going to see a property she intended to sell as quickly as possible. Let her daughter have one day of adventure before reality crashed back in. Cedar Springs was smaller than Rachel expected. One main street, a handful of shops, a diner, a feed store, a bank. The kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where strangers were noticed. Robert Whitmore's office was above the bank, accessed by a narrow staircase with creaking steps. The lawyer was exactly as warm as his voice suggested. Mid-70s, white hair, glasses, suspenders. He had the deed ready, along with several other documents. This is the property survey, the most recent tax assessment, and a key to the main house. Dorothy wanted you to have these as well. He slid a cardboard box across his desk. Inside were photograph albums, old and leather-bound. She kept these for you. Said you should know where you came from. Rachel's throat tightened. Why didn't she contact me when she was alive? Robert's expression grew sad. That's something you'll need to discover for yourself. Dorothy had her reasons. Complex reasons. Family wounds that never healed. But she wanted you to have the farm. She was very specific about that. She said, Rachel will understand when the time comes. She'll see what I protected. Protected? Those were her words. I don't know what she meant. He handed Rachel a pen. The property is yours. Sign here, and initial here. Rachel signed. Each signature felt surreal. She was inheriting land she'd never seen from grandmother she'd never known. When she finished, Robert handed her the deed and an old-fashioned key on a leather strap. The farm is about 6 miles north of town. Take Highway 14, turn left on Old Mill Road. You can't miss it. There's a sign, though it's probably pretty faded by now. He paused. Rachel, Dorothy was a remarkable woman. A bit eccentric, very private, but remarkable. She believed in things most people dismissed. Magic, she'd call it, though not the kind from fairy tales. The magic of work, of patience, of watching over something precious. I think that's what she wanted you to inherit. Not just land, but a purpose. Rachel nodded, not understanding, but too overwhelmed to ask more questions. She and Lily left the office and drove north on Highway 14. The landscape changed quickly outside town. Farmland gave way to forest, pine trees crowding close to the road. Then the fields opened up again, rolling hills with split-rail fences. Turn left on Old Mill Road, the GPS announced. Rachel turned onto a narrow dirt road, barely 2 ruts through overgrown grass. They drove for a mile, maybe more, trees pressing in on both sides. Then the forest opened up and Rachel hit the brakes. The farm spread before them like something from another era. At the center stood a house, 2 stories, painted yellow once, but now faded to the color of old paper. The porch sagged on one side. Several windows were broken. Vines crawled up the walls, claiming the structure for nature. Beyond the house stretched what must have been the honey operation. Dozens of white boxes, beehives, arranged in neat rows. But most had collapsed, their wooden sides rotting, their roofs caved in. A few still stood, but they looked empty, abandoned, like gravestones in a forgotten cemetery. Wow, Lily whispered. It looks haunted. It's not haunted, baby. Just old. But Rachel understood what her daughter meant. The place had an atmosphere, a weight. Like it had been waiting. Like it had secrets. They got out of the car. The air smelled different here. Sweet, despite the decay. Something floral underneath the scent of old wood and moss. Rachel walked toward the house slowly, Lily's hand gripping hers tightly. The front door was locked. Rachel used the key Robert had given her. It turned smoothly, as if someone had oiled it recently. The door swung open with a long creak. Inside, the house was dim, dusty, but not as destroyed as Rachel had feared. The furniture was still there, covered in white sheets. Old-fashioned pieces, solid wood, the kind that lasted generations. The floors were wide planks, scuffed and dirty, but intact. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and above it hung a portrait. Rachel stepped closer. The painting showed a young woman, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back, standing beside a beehive. Her expression was serious but kind. At the bottom of the frame, a small brass plate read, Dorothy Chun, 1962. Is that her? Lily asked. Your grandmother? I think so. The woman in the painting looked nothing like Rachel's vague imaginings. She'd pictured someone frail, elderly. But this Dorothy was strong, capable. Her hands, visible in the painting, were roughened by work. Her eyes held determination. They explored the house room by room. Kitchen with an ancient stove and a hand-pump sink. Dining room with a table that could seat 12. 3 bedrooms upstairs, each with iron-frame beds and dressers full of clothes that smelled like cedar and thyme. Everything was frozen as if Dorothy had just stepped out and never returned. In the master bedroom, Rachel found more photograph albums on a nightstand. She opened one carefully. The photos showed Dorothy at different ages, young and smiling beside a man who must have been her husband, middle-aged, standing in front of the farmhouse in its prime, elderly but still strong, checking beehives with practiced hands. And scattered throughout the albums, tucked between pages like secrets, were photos of a little girl, a child with dark eyes and a bright smile. Rachel's mother. She must be. The resemblance to Lily was unmistakable. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, Lily beside her, and they looked through the photos together. Here was a history Rachel had never known. Her grandmother, her mother as a child, a life lived on this farm. Why had Dorothy never reached out? Why had Rachel's father never mentioned her? The albums ended with photos from the 1970s. After that, nothing. As if Dorothy's life had stopped being documented, or as if she'd stopped wanting to document it. "Mama, can we look at the beehives?" Lily asked. They went back outside. The afternoon sun slanted across the fields. Rachel counted the hives. At least 60, maybe more. Most were in terrible condition, but a few looked maintained. Recently maintained. They walked to the nearest standing hive. It was taller than the others, painted white but clean, no rot visible. Rachel put her hand on the wood and felt warmth. Not heat exactly, but warmth. Like something alive. A bee landed on her wrist. Rachel froze. She'd been stung before, knew it hurt. But this bee didn't sting. It just sat there, antenna moving, as if examining her. Then it flew away, and 10 more bees appeared, circling around them in a lazy spiral. "Mama, they're not scared of us," Lily said, delighted. "Stay still anyway." But the bees didn't seem aggressive. They flew around them like a greeting, then returned to the hive. Rachel pressed her ear against the wood. Inside, she could hear humming. Deep, resonant, alive. This hive wasn't abandoned. It was active. She walked to the next hive. Same thing. Warm, humming, full of life. And the next. Out of the 60-some hives, she counted 15 that were active. The rest were dead or dying, but 15 had survived 15 years of neglect. "How is that possible?" Rachel murmured. "Maybe they're magic bees," Lily suggested. Rachel smiled. "Maybe." Behind a rows of hives, at the far edge of the property, stood a barn. Larger than the house, painted red once, but now weathered to gray. The doors were chained shut with a heavy padlock. Rachel tried the key from the house. It didn't fit. She walked around the barn, looking for another entrance, and found something odd. Fresh footprints in the dirt. Recent footprints, from boots too large to be Dorothy's. Someone had been here. Recently. Rachel's instincts, honed by years of working in dangerous neighborhoods, kicked in. "Lily, get back to the car." "But Mama..." "Now!" Lily ran back toward the house. Rachel pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course not. They were miles from town, surrounded by forest. She was alone with her daughter on a property where someone had been trespassing. She walked back to the car quickly, got Lily inside, locked the doors. "We're leaving. But we just got here. We'll come back. With the sheriff. After I make sure it's safe." They drove back to town. Rachel found the sheriff's office, a small building next to the fire station. Inside, a woman in uniform looked up from her desk. Mid-50s, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much. "Help you? I'm Rachel Morrison. I inherited the Chun honey farm. I think someone's been trespassing on the property. I found fresh footprints near the barn." The sheriff's expression shifted. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. "You're Dorothy's granddaughter." "Yes. Heard she left you the place. I'm Sheriff Kate Brennan. I knew your grandmother well. Checked on her property regularly after she moved to the care facility." She stood. "As for trespassers, that's been an ongoing problem. People in town think the farm is hiding something. They've been trying to get onto the property for years. Dorothy had me post no trespassing signs all over. Didn't stop everyone. Hiding what?" Sheriff Brennan's expression grew guarded. "Rumors. Stories. The kind of thing that happens when someone lives alone for decades and doesn't explain themselves to anyone. People fill in the blanks with imagination. Dorothy was a private woman. That made people suspicious. Suspicious of what? Depends who you ask. Some folks think she was running moonshine through that barn. Others think she was hoarding gold from her late husband's mining days. A few of the older folks claim she was protecting something her husband brought back from the war, something valuable. The sheriff shrugged. It's all nonsense, far as I can tell, but it keeps people curious, and curiosity makes people trespass. Rachel felt a chill. Should I be worried? I have my daughter with me. I'll send a deputy out to patrol the property tonight. Make sure nobody's lurking around. But Rachel, if you're planning to stay there, you should know what you're getting into. That farm, it's got a history, and history has a way of following people. Rachel didn't plan to stay. She planned to sell, but she didn't say that to the sheriff. Instead, she asked, "Can you recommend a realtor? Someone who knows land values." Sheriff Brennan's expression shifted to something like disappointment. "You're selling. I can't afford to keep it. I have a life 4 hours south. A job, a daughter in school. I need the money." "Course you do. Most people would." The sheriff pulled out a business card. "Talk to Jim Henderson at Cedar Springs Realty. He'll give you a fair assessment." Rachel took the card. "Thank you. And Rachel, before you sell, spend some time out there. Walk the property. Look around. Dorothy wanted you to have it for a reason. Maybe figure out what that reason was before you let it go." That evening, Rachel and Lily checked into the only motel in Cedar Springs. It was clean but spare, with thin walls and a heater that rattled. They ate dinner at the diner across the street, burgers and fries that Lily devoured while Rachel pushed food around her plate. Her phone had signal here. She had 17 missed calls from the ambulance service. 3 voicemails from Mr. Chun, her landlord, each one angrier than the last. 2 texts from bill collectors. The weight of her real life pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. She called the ambulance service back. Her supervisor, Gary, answered on the first ring. "Where the hell have you been, Morrison? You missed your shift." Rachel's stomach dropped. "What? I'm off today. I checked the schedule. Schedule changed. We had 2 call-outs. I needed you on at noon. I didn't get any notification. Check your email." I sent it Wednesday. Rachel's email. She barely checked it anymore because her phone's data was so limited. "Gary, I'm sorry. I had a family emergency. I'm out of town. Family emergency. Right? Look, Rachel, you're a good medic, but you've been unreliable lately. Missing shifts, showing up late, calling out. I can't keep covering for you. I haven't missed a shift in 3 months. I haven't called out once. You missed today." Rachel wanted to scream, wanted to throw the phone, wanted to cry. But Lily was watching her with wide, worried eyes, so she kept her voice steady. "I'll be back Monday. I won't miss another shift. See that you don't. We're already looking at replacements." He hung up. Rachel sat there, phone in hand, feeling the walls closing in. If she lost her job at the ambulance service, she'd lose her health insurance. She'd lose half her income. They'd definitely be in a shelter by Christmas. "Mama," Lily's small voice. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, baby. Finish your burger." But everything wasn't fine. Everything was falling apart, faster than Rachel could hold it together. That night, Lily fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the long day. Rachel lay awake in the dark, staring at the water-stained ceiling, doing math in her head. If she sold the farm for $200,000, after taxes, she'd probably net $160,000. Pay off the back rent and the credit cards and medical bills. That would take $15,000. Buy a reliable car, so she didn't miss work because of breakdowns, another $10,000. First and last month's rent on a better apartment, $2,500. Put away $50,000 for emergencies and Lily's future. That left $82,500. Not enough to quit her job, not enough to change their lives fundamentally, but enough to breathe. Enough to survive. She could do this. Sell the farm, take the money, go back to her life, but with a cushion. With hope. Except something in her chest ached when she thought about it. Something that felt like loss for a grandmother she'd never known, for a history she'd just discovered, for a place that should have been hers but never was. The next morning, Rachel called Jim Henderson. He met them at the farm within an hour, a man in his 60s with a clipboard and a measuring wheel. He walked the property, taking notes, humming thoughtfully. 15 acres, mostly cleared. Good soil. Water rights from the creek that runs through the back 40. Buildings need significant work, but the bones are solid. He scribbled calculations. In this market, you could probably get $225,000. Maybe $250,000 if we find the right buyer. Someone looking for a hobby farm or a development opportunity. How long would it take to sell? 3 months, maybe 6. Properties like this, they take time. Not a lot of people looking for rundown honey farms. 6 months. Rachel's heart sank. She didn't have 6 months. She had 30 days before eviction. Maybe 60 if she begged the landlord for an extension. What if I needed to sell faster? Jim looked at her sympathetically. You could price it aggressively, $200,000, and take the first offer. Might move in 6 weeks. Or you could find an investor willing to buy it as is for below market value. I know a developer who flips rural properties. He'd probably offer you $150,000 cash, close in 2 weeks. $150,000. After taxes, maybe $120,000. Still life-changing, but $80,000 less than the property was worth. Let me think about it, Rachel said. After Jim left, Rachel and Lily explored more of the farm. The barn still bothered her, chained and locked with no key. She tried to peer through gaps in the boards but couldn't see anything inside. Just darkness and that same sweet smell she'd noticed before. "Mama, look," Lily called from near the active hives. She was kneeling in the grass, examining something. Rachel hurried over. It was a stone marker, weathered and old, with words carved into the surface. Rachel knelt beside her daughter and read aloud. "The bees know where she's buried. Follow them home." "Who's buried?" Lily asked. "I don't know." Rachel felt that chill again. "Come on, let's go back to the house." But as they walked away, bees rose from the nearest hive. Not attacking, just flying. They circled above Rachel and Lily, then flew toward the barn. At the barn doors, they disappeared through cracks in the wood, vanishing inside. "Follow them home," the marker had said. Rachel stood there, watching bees pour through the cracks, and felt something shift in her understanding. This wasn't just an abandoned farm. Something was here. Something Dorothy had protected. She tried the barn doors again, pulling at the chains. They were solid, new even. Whoever had been maintaining those 15 hives had also been securing this barn. Rachel walked back to the house and searched more thoroughly this time. In the kitchen, she found a junk drawer full of keys. She took the whole drawer outside and tried every key on the barn's padlock. None fit. In the master bedroom, she went through Dorothy's dresser. Clothes, old and musty. In the bottom drawer, wrapped in a silk scarf, she found a metal box. Inside the box was another key, this one larger, newer, with a tag attached. Queen's Chamber. For Rachel only. Queen's Chamber. Rachel's hands shook as she carried the key back to the barn. This time it fit. The padlock clicked open. Rachel removed the chains and pulled the barn doors wide. Sunlight flooded into the space, revealing what Dorothy had protected for 15 years. The barn was full of beehives, but not like the ones outside. These were massive, 4 feet tall, carefully maintained, and surrounded by shelving units holding jars and jars of honey. Thousands of jars, maybe tens of thousands, all labeled and dated, going back decades. But that wasn't what made Rachel's breath catch. At the center of the barn, on a raised platform, stood one hive unlike any other. It was 6 feet tall, made from wood so old it looked petrified. The entrance was carved with intricate symbols, and around it, the air shimmered with bees, thousands of them, moving in patterns that looked almost deliberate. Rachel approached slowly. Lily grabbed her hand. "Mama, that one's different." "Yeah, baby, it is." The closer Rachel got, the more she felt it. Warmth radiating from the hive, a humming that seemed to resonate in her bones, and a smell, that sweet floral scent, so strong it was almost intoxicating. She circled the hive, looking for an opening, a way to look inside. On the back, she found a small door, latched but not locked. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside wasn't what she expected. Instead of frames of honeycomb, she saw something else. A cavity, carefully carved, lined with wax. And filling that cavity, wrapped in ancient cloth, were bundles. Rachel pulled one out carefully. The cloth fell away, revealing cash. $100 bills, bound with rubber bands, old but pristine. She opened another bundle. More cash. And another. And another. Mama, is that money? Yes, baby. A lot of money. Rachel's mind spun. She pulled out more bundles, counting rapidly. Each bundle was $10,000. She counted 30 bundles before she had to sit down, her legs giving out. $300,000. Possibly more, hidden in a beehive. But why? And how much more was there? She stood and examined the hive more carefully. The main cavity was only the first section. Behind it was another door, smaller, almost invisible. She opened it. Inside was another cavity. This one held different items. Small wooden boxes, old and beautifully carved. Rachel opened one. Inside, nestled in silk, were coins. Gold coins, each one stamped with dates from the 1800s. She opened another box. More coins, these silver. Another box held jewelry, antique pieces with stones that caught the light and threw rainbows across the barn wall. Rachel's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the box. She set it down carefully and kept searching. There were more cavities, more hidden sections, each one revealing something impossible. Stock certificates from companies she recognized, bearer bonds with numbers that made her dizzy, and in the very bottom cavity, wrapped in velvet, a leather journal. Rachel opened the journal with trembling hands. The first entry was dated 1968, written in careful handwriting she recognized from the photograph albums. Dorothy's handwriting. My husband passed away 3 months ago. Before he died, he told me about the treasure. Not just money, but something more precious. He made me promise to protect it, to keep it secret, to pass it only to someone who would understand its true value. Not the monetary worth, but what it represents. Years of work, of patience, of building something meaningful. Rachel turned pages, her eyes racing over entries that spanned decades. Dorothy writing about maintaining the hives, about watching over the treasure, about praying that someday her estranged family would return, that she could pass this burden and blessing to someone who deserved it. My daughter left when she was 18. She couldn't stand the isolation, the secrets, the weight of what we protected. She married a man who wanted nothing to do with our life. I haven't seen her in 20 years. I have a granddaughter I've never met. Rachel. I see her photograph, sometimes, sent by someone who knows I watch. She looks like her mother. I pray she has my strength. Because someday, when I'm gone, this will all be hers. And she'll have to decide what to do with $475 million that the world doesn't know exists. Rachel's vision went black at the edges. She sat down hard on the barn floor, the journal clutched to her chest. $475 million. Not $200,000. Not even $1 million. $475 million. Mama, Lily's voice seemed far away. Mama, you're scaring me. Rachel forced herself to breathe, to focus. I'm okay, baby. Just surprised. But she wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. Because she'd just discovered that her grandmother, a woman she'd never met, had hidden a fortune in a barn full of bees and left it all to her. A fortune that couldn't exist, that shouldn't exist, that would destroy her life if anyone found out about it. Rachel stood on shaking legs and looked around the barn, at the thousands of jars of honey, probably worth thousands of dollars themselves, at the hives maintained with such care, at the queen's chamber at the center, holding secrets that had been protected for decades. Follow them home, the stone marker had said. The bees had led her here, to this, to an inheritance that could save her or destroy her, depending on what she did next. She closed the journal and tucked it under her arm. Come on, Lily. We need to go back to town. But Mama, the money. Don't touch anything. Don't tell anyone what you saw. Not yet. Rachel locked the barn carefully, her mind racing. This is our secret. Do you understand? Our secret. Lily nodded solemnly. She was only 10, but she understood secrets. They'd kept enough of them over the years. Secrets about unpaid bills, about skipped meals, about crying herself to sleep when she thought Rachel couldn't hear. They drove back to Cedar Springs in silence. Rachel's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. A fortune, a life-changing, impossible fortune, hidden in a barn, protected by bees, left to her by a grandmother who'd watched her from a distance and decided she was worthy. But worthy of what? Of this burden? Of this secret? Of the weight of deciding what to do with money that legally shouldn't exist? Rachel parked in front of the motel and sat there, engine running, trying to think clearly. If she reported this, the government would take it. Estate taxes, investigations into where it came from, why it was hidden. They'd seize everything. She'd be lucky to keep 10%. But if she didn't report it, she'd be guilty of concealing assets, tax evasion, fraud. She could go to prison. Lily could be taken away. Unless nobody knew, the thought sent ice through her veins. Keep the secret. Take what she needed. Leave the rest hidden, just like Dorothy had done for decades. But how? How do you access $475 million without anyone noticing? Rachel pulled out Dorothy's journal and started reading more carefully. Dorothy had thought about this, had planned for it. The journal contained instructions, lists of assets that could be liquidated carefully, names of lawyers and accountants who specialized in estate management for people with complex situations. Dorothy had been preparing for this moment. The moment when Rachel would inherit not just a farm, but a fortune and the knowledge of how to use it without getting caught. Rachel read until the words blurred together. Then she made a decision. She wouldn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until she understood what she was dealing with. Not until she had a plan. She and Lily would stay in Cedar Springs for a few more days. She'd explore the farm more thoroughly. She'd read every entry in Dorothy's journal. She'd figure out how her grandmother had hidden this money for so long and what she was supposed to do with it. And then, maybe, she'd know whether to run away or claim her impossible inheritance. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark motel room, listening to Lily's steady breathing, and thought about the paramedic shifts waiting for her back home. The eviction notice, the unpaid bills, the constant, crushing weight of trying to survive. She thought about $475 million, enough money to never worry again. Enough to give Lily everything. Enough to change not just their lives, but the lives of everyone they knew. But she also thought about Dorothy, alone in that farmhouse for decades, protecting something she never got to enjoy, dying in a care facility with only a lawyer at her funeral. Was that Rachel's future if she claimed this inheritance? A life spent hiding, paranoid, guarding money she couldn't spend? Or was there another way? Rachel pulled out the journal again and read by the light of her phone. She read about Dorothy's late husband, a man named James Chun who'd made his fortune in logging and land development in the 1950s. He'd converted everything to cash, gold, and bearer bonds before the IRS started tracking large accounts. He'd hidden it all, planning to use it slowly over time to avoid suspicion. But then he died young, leaving Dorothy with a secret she didn't know how to use. So she kept it hidden, maintained it, protected it, and waited for the right person to inherit it. You'll know what to do, Dorothy had written in one entry. You'll see the possibilities I never did. You'll be brave enough to use this money the way it was meant to be used. Not just for yourself, but for others. For the people who need it. That's the real magic of what James built. Not the money itself, but what it could become in the right hands. Rachel closed the journal and stared at the ceiling. In the right hands. Was she the right hands? A paramedic who barely kept her head above water? A single mother who couldn't even keep the heat working in her apartment? Or was she exactly the right person because she understood struggle, because she knew what it meant to need help, because she'd seen people dying in the street while others drove by in expensive cars and didn't even glance over? By morning, Rachel had made a decision. She wouldn't run away. She wouldn't sell the farm. She'd claim her inheritance. All of it. And she'd figure out how to do it without destroying her life in the process. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Rachel spent the next 3 days living between two worlds. During the day, she and Lily explored the farm, cataloging everything in the barn, reading Dorothy's journals, trying to understand the full scope of what she'd inherited. At night, she called Robert Whitmore, the lawyer, and asked questions that seemed casual but were really about how to access hidden money without triggering investigations. Dorothy was always very private about her finances. Robert told her over the phone. She used several different banks, kept assets in different states, worked with accountants who specialized in estate planning for high-net-worth individuals. I have some of those names if you'd like to speak with them. I would. Robert sent her a list. Rachel researched each name, looking for reviews, for complaints, for any sign they weren't legitimate. What she found surprised her. These weren't shady offshore accountants. They were established professionals who worked with families that had old money, complex trusts, assets that predated modern tax law. She called the first name on the list. Margaret Holloway, CPA, estate tax specialist. Ms. Morrison. Margaret's voice was warm, professional. Robert said you might reach out. I worked with your grandmother for 30 years. She was a remarkable woman. She left me some property and some other assets. I'm trying to figure out how to handle them. There was a pause. Assets that perhaps weren't on public record? Yes, that's not uncommon with estates like Dorothy's. Families that built wealth before modern banking systems, who valued privacy, who didn't trust government oversight. The good news is there are legal ways to manage these situations. It requires careful planning, proper documentation, and a willingness to work within the system while protecting your family's privacy. Can you help me? That's what I do. But Rachel, I need to ask you something first. Do you plan to keep this money secret forever? Or do you plan to use it? Rachel thought about the question. Use it. Good. Because money that never gets used is just paper. Money that changes lives, that's power. And power used wisely can transform everything. Margaret paused. I can help you create a structure that allows you to access your inheritance legally, pay whatever taxes are owed going forward, and maintain enough privacy to protect yourself and your daughter. But will take time and trust. How much time? 6 months to set up properly. Maybe a year to fully implement. But in the meantime, I can help you access enough funds to stabilize your immediate situation. Pay off debts, secure housing, address whatever crisis brought you to this point. Rachel's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. I'm being evicted. I'm about to lose my job. I have a 10-year-old daughter who deserves better than the life I've been able to give her. Then let's fix that. Send me documentation of your immediate debts. I'll arrange for payment through a private loan against the estate. As far as anyone knows, you've borrowed money from Dorothy's estate to get back on your feet. Nothing illegal, nothing suspicious. Just a granddaughter using her inheritance to survive. And the rest we handle carefully. We create trusts, foundations, investment accounts. We convert assets slowly, legitimately, paying taxes on everything we move. It's not fast and it's not free, but it's legal. And it means you get to keep your inheritance instead of watching the government take 90% of it. Rachel felt hope for the first time in days. Real hope. Not the desperate kind that comes from buying a lottery ticket, but the solid kind that comes from having a plan. When can we start? Today. Send me the documentation. I'll have funds available to you within 48 hours. They talked for another hour. Margaret explained the process, the timeline, the costs. By the time Rachel hung up, she understood that this was possible. Difficult, complicated, requiring patience and discretion, but possible. She called her landlord, Mr. Chun, and left a message. I'll have your rent by Monday. All of it. And I'll be moving out at the end of the month. Let him choke on that. Let him wonder how she'd suddenly come up with the money. She called Gary at the ambulance service. I need to give 2 weeks' notice. I've had a family situation come up. I'm relocating to Oregon. You're quitting? Yes. There was silence. Then, good luck, Morrison. You're one of the best medics I've had. Don't screw up your next opportunity. Rachel hung up and felt weight lift from her shoulders. She was walking away from the life that had been killing her slowly. She was claiming something better, but claiming it meant understanding it. That afternoon, she returned to the farm alone. Lily was back at the motel, watching movies and eating takeout. Rachel needed to do this part by herself. She entered the barn and stood before the queen's chamber. The massive hive hummed with life, bees moving in and out, carrying pollen, tending their home. She opened the small door at the back and looked inside at the cavities she'd already found. Then she looked more carefully at the structure itself. The hive was genius. James Chun had built it as a giant safe, each cavity accessible through hidden panels. Rachel counted 7 separate sections, each one sealed and protected. She'd only opened 3. She opened the 4th cavity. Inside were documents. Real estate deeds to properties all over Oregon and Washington. Buildings, land, mineral rights. Each deed carefully preserved in protective sleeves. The 5th cavity held more stock certificates. Companies Rachel recognized, companies that had grown exponentially since the 1950s. If these certificates were still valid, if they'd appreciated over the decades, they could be worth millions by themselves. The 6th cavity held artwork. Small pieces, probably chosen for their size rather than their fame, but each one wrapped carefully and labeled. Paintings, drawings, sculptures. Rachel didn't know art, but she knew value when she saw it. And the 7th cavity, the largest and deepest, held something different. A metal box, sealed with wax. Rachel broke the seal and opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to Rachel. She sat down on the barn floor, her back against the hive, and started reading. The first letter was dated 1986, the year Rachel was born. Dear Rachel, you don't know me yet, but I know you. I saw your photograph today. Your mother sent it through a mutual friend who thought I should know I have a granddaughter. You're beautiful. You have your mother's eyes and, I hope, my stubbornness. I want to meet you, but your mother has made it clear I'm not welcome in her life. She blames me for the isolation she grew up with, for the secrets, for everything she lost by being born into our family. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should have done things differently. But I made choices I believed were right at the time. Now I have to live with them. I'm writing this letter because someday you'll inherit everything I protected. And when you do, I want you to understand why. Your grandfather and I built this fortune honestly. Through work, through investment, through taking risks that paid off. But we kept it hidden because we didn't trust the government, didn't trust banks, didn't trust anyone who might take what we built. We were wrong about some things. But we were right that power attracts danger. Right that money changes people. Right that sometimes the only way to protect something precious is to hide it completely. I'm hiding it for you, Rachel. For the granddaughter I'll probably never meet. Use it well. Use it wisely. And don't make my mistake of letting fear keep you from living. Love, your grandmother Dorothy. Rachel wiped tears from her face and read the next letter. And the next. 38 letters spanning 38 years. One for each year of Dorothy's life after Rachel was born. Dorothy writing about her hopes, her regrets, her observations about the world. About checking on Rachel from a distance, seeing her graduate high school, hearing she become a paramedic, learning she had a daughter of her own. I'm so proud of you, one letter read. You chose a profession that helps people. You could have done anything, but you chose service. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. You're the right person to inherit this. Not because you need the money, though I know you're struggling, but because you'll use it to help others. I can see it in every choice you've made. The final letter was dated 3 months before Dorothy's death. Dear Rachel, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I'm sorry we never met. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to break the silence your mother created. But I'm not sorry I left you everything. You've earned it through the life you've lived, the person you become. The fortune is yours. The farm is yours. The burden and the blessing both. Do something beautiful with it. Something I never had the courage to do. Transform this hidden wealth into visible good. Build something that matters. And when people ask how you did it, tell them the truth. You inherited it from a grandmother who loved you from a distance and believed you were strong enough to carry what she couldn't. With all my love, Dorothy. Rachel sat in the barn, surrounded by bees and honey and hidden fortune, and sobbed. For the grandmother she'd never known. For the decades of separation. For all the time they'd lost. For the weight Dorothy had carried alone. But also for herself. For the struggling paramedic who was about to become one of the wealthiest women in Oregon. For the single mother who could now give her daughter everything. For the woman who'd been broken by life and was about to be remade. She dried her eyes and stood. The bees circled around her, landing on her arms, her shoulders, her hair. Not stinging, just present, like they were welcoming her, like they knew she was the new guardian. Rachel closed all the cavities carefully and locked the barn. Then she walked back to the house and sat on the front porch, looking out over the acres that were now hers. 15 acres, 60 hives, a fortune hidden in plain sight, and a choice. She could do what Dorothy did, hide it forever, protect it, live in fear. Or she could do what Dorothy had dreamed of. Use it, transform it, build something that mattered. By the time Lily arrived back at the farm the next day, Rachel had made her decision. Baby, we're not going back to the city. We're staying here. Lily's eyes went wide. We're keeping the farm. We're keeping the farm. And we're going to do something with it. What? Rachel smiled. Something important. Over the next 6 months, Rachel's life transformed in ways that felt like a fairy tale, but were built on careful planning, legal paperwork, and the tireless work of Margaret Holloway and her team. First, Rachel created the Chun Family Trust, a legal entity that owned the farm and would eventually hold all the assets once they were properly documented and moved. The trust paid her a salary as property manager, enough to live comfortably and pay off all her debts without raising suspicion. Second, Margaret helped her sell some of the gold coins through private auction houses that specialized in estate liquidation. The proceeds, properly taxed and documented, went into investment accounts that would fund the next phase. Third, Rachel hired contractors to restore the farmhouse and rebuild the apiaries. Not as they were, but as they could be. The farmhouse became a comfortable home for her and Lily. The barn became a working honey production facility, and the rows of collapsed hives were replaced with new ones, carefully managed, producing honey that actually sold. The Queen's chamber remained secret, hidden behind a false wall in the barn's new storage room. Only Rachel and Margaret knew it existed. Only they knew that inside, carefully cataloged and protected, was a fortune that would take years to fully liquidate and legalize. By the time Lily started 6th grade at Cedar Springs Elementary, the farm was thriving. Rachel had hired 2 beekeepers, both women from town who needed steady work. She'd opened a small shop in town selling honey and beeswax products. And she'd started something Dorothy would have loved, a program providing beekeeping training to single mothers, helping them start their own small businesses. "You're quite the entrepreneur," Sheriff Brennan said one day when she stopped by to buy honey. Dorothy would be proud. "I hope so," Rachel said. The sheriff leaned close. "Between you and me, people in town used to think she was crazy. Hoarding something valuable, keeping the farm closed off, never explaining herself. But I knew her better than most. She was protecting something, and she was waiting for the right person to pass it to. Looks like she found them." Rachel just smiled. Over the next 2 years, Rachel carefully, methodically, moved assets from the hidden cavities into legitimate channels. Real estate deeds were filed with county offices, revealing properties Dorothy had owned for decades. Stock certificates were transferred to modern accounts, their value assessed and taxed. Artwork was donated to museums, generating tax deductions and good press. And cash, lots of cash, was deposited into investment accounts in small amounts that never triggered reporting requirements. Margaret managed it all with the precision of surgeon, ensuring every dollar was accounted for, every transaction legal, every tax paid. By the time Lily turned 13, the Chun Family Trust was worth $520 million, the original $475 million having grown through careful investment. Rachel was the trustee, managing it according to Dorothy's wishes as outlined in documents Margaret had helped create. The trust funded scholarships for paramedics and first responders. It provided grants to rural medical clinics. It supported women's shelters and job training programs. It invested in sustainable farming initiatives and environmental conservation. And it did all of this quietly, without fanfare, without Rachel's name attached, just like Dorothy would have wanted. But Rachel's real project, the one she poured her heart into, was the farm itself. She expanded the apiaries to 200 hives, producing honey that won awards at state fairs. She built a visitor center where people could learn about beekeeping and sustainability. She created internships for young people interested in agriculture. And she preserved the Queen's chamber, now empty of its treasure but still humming with life, as a reminder of where it all started. a memorial to the bees that had protected Dorothy's secret for decades. A symbol of patience, of persistence, of the quiet work that changes everything. The town of Cedar Springs transformed along with the farm. Rachel's businesses employed 20 people directly and supported dozens more indirectly. The honey shop became a tourist destination. The visitor center brought in school groups from all over the state. And Rachel, the woman who'd arrived broke and desperate, became someone the town respected. Not because of her money, though a few people suspected she had more than she showed, but because of what she'd built, because of the jobs she'd created, because of the way she treated people with dignity and paid fair wages and invested in her community. When people asked how she'd transformed the farm so quickly, she told a version of the truth. Dorothy had left her more than just land. She'd left investments, assets, a foundation to build on. It wasn't a lie, just an incomplete truth. On the 5th anniversary of inheriting the farm, Rachel held a celebration. The whole town was invited. They gathered in the fields between the hives, tables laden with food, children running through the grass, music playing from speakers strung between the trees. Sheriff Brennan gave a toast to Rachel Morrison, who took something forgotten and made it matter again. Jim Henderson, the realtor who'd wanted to sell the farm, raised his glass. I told you it was worth $225,000. I was wrong. What you've built here is priceless. And Lily, now 15 and helping run the honey shop on weekends, stood beside her mother and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mama. You did what great-grandma Dorothy wanted. You made the treasure matter." Rachel hugged her daughter tight. We made it matter. Together. That night, after everyone had gone home, Rachel walked to the barn alone. She stood in front of where the Queen's chamber had been, now just another wall in the storage room. But she could still feel it, the warmth, the humming, the presence of something bigger than herself. "Thank you," she whispered to Dorothy's memory. "Thank you for believing I could do this, for trusting me with something precious, for giving me and Lily a future." The bees, ever present, circled around her, landing on her arms, her shoulders, her hair. They'd accepted her years ago as the new guardian. Now, they were simply family. Rachel locked up the barn and walked back to the farmhouse. Through the windows, she could see Lily doing homework at the kitchen table. Their home, their life, built on a foundation Dorothy had laid decades ago. Built on bees and patience and the quiet faith that someday the right person would find what she'd hidden. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was never just money. It was the knowledge that someone had believed in her before she believed in herself. That someone had seen her struggling and decided she deserved better. That someone had waited, protected, and planned for the moment when Rachel would finally be ready to claim her impossible legacy. And Rachel had claimed it, not by taking everything for herself, but by transforming it into something that helped others, by building businesses that employed people, by funding programs that changed lives, by doing exactly what Dorothy had dreamed of but never been brave enough to do herself. She'd broken the cycle of fear that had kept the Chun fortune hidden for generations. She'd brought it into the light, and in doing so, she'd honored Dorothy more than silence ever could. But the story of how Rachel Morrison claimed her inheritance and transformed it into something meaningful wasn't simple or easy. There were battles she had to fight, enemies she never expected, and moments when everything nearly fell apart. 3 years after she'd first discovered the fortune in the Queen's chamber, Rachel received a letter that made her blood run cold. It came from a law firm in Portland, Dixon and Associates, litigation specialists. Inside was a lawsuit filed by someone named Robert Chun, claiming to be a distant cousin of Dorothy's late husband, James Chun. He was suing for half the estate, claiming James had promised his branch of the family a share of any inheritance. Rachel sat at her kitchen table, the letter trembling in her hands. Lily was at school. The house was quiet except for the sound of bees humming outside the window. A lawsuit meant discovery. It meant lawyers going through every financial record. It meant questions about where the money came from, how much there really was, whether it had been properly reported. It meant exposure. Rachel called Margaret Holloway immediately. The accountant answered on the first ring, as if she'd been expecting this call. "You got a letter from Robert Chen's lawyers." "How did you know?" "Because I got one too. He's fishing, Rachel. He knows Dorothy left you the farm. He knows you've been making improvements. He thinks there's money, and he wants to share. Is he really related to James?" "Distantly. Very distantly. Third cousin twice removed, something like that. No legal claim whatsoever to Dorothy's estate. But that won't stop him from making your life hell with this lawsuit." Rachel's hands shook. "What do I do?" "We fight." "But Rachel, this is going to get messy. They'll demand financial records. They'll want to know how you funded all the improvements to the farm. We've been careful, we've documented everything properly, but it's going to be scrutinized. Will they find out about the fortune?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Not if we're smart. We show them what they need to see. The trust is legitimate. The income is documented. The investments are taxed. As far as anyone knows, Dorothy left you a working farm with some liquid assets that you've managed well. Nothing illegal, nothing suspicious. But what about the rest? The gold, the bonds, the things we haven't liquidated yet. Those stay hidden. The Queen's chamber stays locked. We don't mention what we haven't touched. We only defend what we've disclosed." Rachel took a deep breath. "How long will this take?" "A year, maybe 2. And it's going to cost money. Legal fees, court costs, expert witnesses. Could run into the hundreds of thousands." "I have it." "I know you do. But Rachel, you need to understand something. This won't be the last time someone comes after you. Word is spreading that Dorothy's granddaughter has turned the old farm into something successful. People are curious. People are jealous. Some people will always believe there's more than what you're showing. So what? I just live under constant threat." "No, you live carefully. You maintain the privacy Dorothy fought for, and you trust that the structure we've built is solid enough to withstand scrutiny." The lawsuit dragged on for 18 months. Robert Chen's lawyers demanded financial records going back 5 years. They wanted tax returns, bank statements, investment account details. Margaret provided everything they asked for, every document carefully prepared, every number properly sourced. The trust's assets, as disclosed, totaled $8.5 million. A combination of Dorothy's documented investments, the sale of some property and assets, and careful management over several years. Substantial enough to explain the farm's restoration, but not so large as to raise suspicions about hidden wealth. Robert Chen's lawyers argued it wasn't enough. That James Chen had been wealthier than records showed. That Dorothy must have hidden money. That Rachel knew where it was and was concealing it. In depositions, Rachel told the truth as carefully as possible. Yes, Dorothy had left her more than just land. Yes, there had been assets she'd liquidated. No, she didn't know the full extent of what James Chen had earned his lifetime. No, she hadn't found any hidden caches of money beyond what had been properly reported and taxed. It wasn't lying. It was simply not volunteering information that wasn't asked for in exactly the right way. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Harriet Stone, seemed skeptical of Robert Chen's claims from the beginning. During a hearing 6 months into the lawsuit, she addressed his lawyer directly. "Counsel, you're claiming your client is entitled to assets that you cannot prove exist. Ms. Morrison has provided documentation of everything she inherited and everything she's earned since. Unless you have evidence of concealment, this case is wasting the court's time." Robert Chen's lawyer scrambled. "Your Honor, we believe there are assets that haven't been disclosed. Family stories, rumors about James Chen's wealth. Rumors are not evidence. Do you have documentation? Bank records? Witnesses? We're working to obtain them. You've had 18 months. Either produce evidence or withdraw your claim." 3 weeks later, Robert Chen dropped the lawsuit. His lawyers sent a terse letter saying they decided not to pursue the matter further. Rachel celebrated quietly, drinking tea on her front porch, watching the bees return to their hives at sunset. But Margaret's warning proved accurate. 6 months after that lawsuit ended, a different threat emerged. A developer from California named Marcus Webb showed up in Cedar Springs with plans to build a resort community. He'd been buying up land around the area, and he wanted Rachel's farm. She met him at the honey shop in town. He was in his 50s, tan, expensively dressed, with the kind of confident smile that came from getting what he wanted. Ms. Morrison, I'll be direct. Your farm is in the perfect location for what I'm building. 15 acres, good access, beautiful views. I'm prepared to offer you $4 million. Cash. 30-day close. Rachel stirred honey into her tea slowly. The farm's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. $5 million. Still not interested? Marcus leaned forward. Rachel, may I call you Rachel? I've done my research. You were a paramedic 4 years ago, barely making ends meet. Now you're running a successful honey business. That's impressive. But this farm, it could be worth so much more. $10 million. That's my final offer. And I said no. His smile faded. You're making a mistake. This area is being developed whether you like it or not. Property values are going to skyrocket. In 5 years, your land will be worth $20 million. But only if you develop it. If you keep running bees and selling honey, you're wasting potential. Rachel met his eyes steadily. That's your definition of waste. Not mine. I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to help yourself. And I'm not interested in being helped. Good day, Mr. Webb. He stood, his expression hardening. You're going to regret this. I doubt that. But Marcus Webb wasn't a man who accepted rejection easily. Over the next few months, strange things started happening. Building inspectors showed up at the farm, claiming they'd received complaints about unpermitted structures. The health department investigated the honey production facility, looking for violations. The zoning board suddenly questioned whether a farm in an agricultural zone could operate a retail shop. Rachel fought every challenge. Every inspection came back clean. Every investigation found no violations. Every zoning question was answered with proper documentation. But it was exhausting and expensive and designed to wear her down. Sheriff Brennan stopped by one afternoon while Rachel was working in hives. You've got a problem, and his name is Marcus Webb. I figured that out. He's been making calls, talking to city council members, county commissioners, suggesting that your farm might not be operating entirely above board, implying there are questions about how you funded all these improvements. Rachel's stomach clenched. He doesn't have any evidence. He doesn't need evidence. He just needs to create enough doubt that people start investigating. And once people start investigating, they find things. Maybe not what they're looking for, but things. What should I do? Sheriff Brennan looked out over the rows of hives, the restored barn, the farmhouse that gleamed white in the afternoon sun. Dorothy fought people like him for decades. She used privacy as her weapon. Never explained, never justified, never gave them anything to latch onto. But Rachel, you've built something public here. Something visible. That makes you vulnerable in ways Dorothy never was. So I should hide? No. You should fight back. But not the way he's fighting. He's using lawyers and money and political pressure. You use something more powerful. What? Community. That evening, Rachel called a meeting at the farm. She invited everyone she'd hired over the years. The beekeepers, the shop workers, the seasonal help. She invited the single mothers she'd trained and funded. The paramedics whose scholarships her trust had paid for. The people from town who'd benefited from her business. 50 people showed up. They gathered in the field between the hives, folding chairs set up in rows, the setting sun casting long shadows. Rachel stood before them, nervous but determined. Most of you know that a developer named Marcus Webb wants to buy this farm. I've refused to sell. Now he's trying to force me out through harassment and legal pressure. I wanted you to know because what happens here affects all of you. If I sell, if this becomes a resort development, the jobs go away. The training programs end. The farm dies. A woman named Maria stood up. She was one of the first people Rachel had hired, a single mother who'd been working 3 jobs before Rachel gave her steady employment. What can we do? Show up, Rachel said. The next city council meeting, when Marcus Webb makes his case for why this land should be developed, I need you there. I need you to tell them what this farm means. Not to me, to you. The city council meeting was packed. Marcus Webb had come prepared with slides, statistics, economic projections showing how his resort development would bring jobs and tax revenue. He painted a picture of progress, of growth, of Cedar Springs becoming a destination. Then Rachel's people spoke. One by one, they stood and told their stories. Maria talked about how the farm had given her stability, how she'd been able to stop working 3 jobs, how her kids were thriving because she could finally be home for dinner. Another woman, Lisa, described the beekeeping training program that had helped her start her own small business. A paramedic named Jake explained how Rachel's scholarship had paid for his certification, how he was now working in the community, saving lives. 20 people spoke, each one a testimony to what the farm had become. Not just a business, but a lifeline. Not just property, but a community resource. When they finished, the council room was silent. Then the council president, an older man named Thomas Wright, spoke. "Mr. Webb, your development sounds impressive on paper. But what Ms. Morrison has built, what these people have described that's real, that's already here. I don't think this council is interested in replacing something that's working with something that's theoretical." The vote was unanimous. No zoning changes. No special permits. The farm would remain agricultural. Marcus Webb left town within a week, and Rachel never heard from him again. But the victory came at a cost. The attention had been intense. People had questions about how Rachel had funded everything. Newspaper reporters wrote articles about the farm's transformation. Financial bloggers speculated about her net worth. Margaret called her late one night. "We need to be more careful. Too many people are curious. Too many questions are being asked. What do you suggest? We slow down. No more major projects for a while. No more expansion. We let things settle. Let people's attention move on to something else. And Rachel, we need to finish liquidating the remaining assets. Get everything converted, properly documented, and into the trust where it's protected. No more hidden chambers. No more secrets that could be discovered." Over the next year, Rachel and Margaret worked systematically to empty the Queen's chamber. Every remaining gold coin was sold through private auction. Every bond was redeemed. Every stock certificate was transferred. The artwork that hadn't been donated was sold to private collectors. By the time they finished, the Queen's chamber was truly empty. Just an empty cavity in an old hive, a reminder of what had been hidden there. The Chun family trust, now holding the full fortune properly documented and invested, was worth $587 million. The original $475 million had grown through careful management. Every dollar was accounted for. Every transaction was legal. Every tax had been paid. Rachel could finally breathe easily. She'd done it. She'd taken a hidden fortune and brought it into the light. Not all at once, not recklessly, but carefully and legally. She transformed Dorothy's curse into a blessing. James Chin's buried wealth into visible good. The farm continued to thrive. By the time Lily graduated high school, it employed 35 people and produced some of the highest quality honey in the Pacific Northwest. The training programs had expanded to include not just beekeeping, but sustainable agriculture, small business management, and environmental conservation. Rachel created partnerships with universities to study pollinator health. She funded research into colony collapse disorder. She turned the farm into a living laboratory where scientists could study bees in their natural habitat, while also teaching the next generation of beekeepers. And through it all, she remained quiet about her wealth. In Cedar Springs, she was known as a successful businesswoman, someone who'd inherited a rundown farm and made something of it. People respected her, but they didn't know the full truth. Only Margaret knew. Only Sheriff Brennan suspected. And that was exactly how it needed to be. When Lily turned 18 and prepared to leave for college, Rachel took her daughter to the barn one last time. They stood where the Queen's chamber had been, now just a wall in the storage room. "This is where it all started," Rachel said. "Where I found the fortune that changed everything. And you emptied it. I transformed it." Dorothy kept it hidden because she was afraid. Afraid of being judged, afraid of being taken advantage of, afraid of what people would do if they knew. But fear is a prison, baby. She lived in a prison for 70 years. And you broke free. I did. But it took courage. It took help. It took Margaret's expertise and Sheriff Brennan's protection and the trust of people in this community. I couldn't have done it alone. Lily looked around the barn, at the modern honey production facility, at the storage shelves lined with jars ready to ship. "What you've built here, Mama, it's not just about the money. It's about giving people opportunity, dignity, Hope. That's what Dorothy wanted. She couldn't figure out how to do it, so she passed the burden to me. And someday, I'll pass it to you. I'll be ready. Rachel hugged her daughter. I know you will. The years continued to unfold. Lily studied agriculture and business, came home during summers to work on the farm, and brought fresh ideas and energy. She expanded the educational programs, created social media presence for the business, and helped Rachel plan for the future. When Lily was 25, she officially joined the board of the Chun Family Trust. Rachel taught her everything: how the fortune had been hidden, how it had been discovered, how it had been carefully legitimized and invested. She showed her daughter the financial statements, the investment strategies, the charitable giving framework. This is bigger than us, Rachel explained. This money doesn't really belong to us. We're stewards, guardians. Our job is to protect it, grow it, and use it to help people. Like Dorothy was a guardian. Exactly. She just couldn't figure out how to use it. We figured that out for her. By the time Rachel turned 50, she'd been managing the farm and the trust for 14 years. The fortune had grown to $780 million. The farm had become a model of sustainable agriculture studied by institutions worldwide. And Rachel herself had become something she never imagined she'd be: a philanthropist. Not publicly. She never put her name on buildings or foundations. But through the Chun Family Trust, she funded dozens of initiatives. Scholarships for first responders and medical professionals, grants to rural clinics and emergency services, support for environmental conservation and pollinator research, housing assistance for single mothers, job training programs for people trying to build better lives. Every dollar Dorothy had hidden, every coin James Chun had buried, every bond they protected, it all flowed back into the world as help for people who needed it. That was the real magic of what Rachel had accomplished. Not just claiming the inheritance, but transforming it from hidden wealth into visible good. From a curse that had isolated Dorothy into a blessing that connected hundreds of people. She thought about that one evening as she walked through the farm at sunset. The hives hummed with activity. The barn glowed with warm light from the production facility, where workers were bottling the day's harvest. The farmhouse, where she and Lily lived, looked like something from a magazine cover. Everything had changed since that day. She'd stood in a county clerk's office with an eviction notice in one hand and an inheritance letter in the other. Everything except the bees. They'd been here all along, keeping their secrets, waiting for someone brave enough to claim them. Rachel stopped at the spot where the Queen's chamber had stood. The hive was long gone, replaced by modern equipment, but she could still feel it. The weight of what had been hidden, the hope of what it could become. Thank you, she whispered to Dorothy's memory. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for believing I could do what you couldn't. Thank you for giving me and Lily a future. A bee landed on her wrist. She watched it for a moment, then smiled as it flew away to join the others returning to their hives for the night. The bees had kept Dorothy's secret for decades. They'd led Rachel to it when the time was right. And now they continued their work, making honey, pollinating crops, sustaining life. They'd known all along what humans took years to learn. That wealth hidden in darkness does no good. That treasures buried cannot bloom. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is bring secrets into the light and transform them into something beautiful. Rachel had done that. And in doing so, she'd honored every dream Dorothy had, every hope James Chun carried, every moment of patience the bees demonstrated. She'd proved that broken things can be healed, that hidden fortunes can fund visible good, and that sometimes the poorest among us become the richest, not because of what we inherit, but because of what we choose to build with it. The farm would continue. Lily would inherit it someday, along with the trust and its responsibilities. And maybe generations from now, there would be another Rachel, another person who needed hope, who deserved better, who would receive the inheritance and understand what it meant to be a guardian of something precious. That was the real legacy, not the money, but the wisdom to use it well, the courage to claim it despite the risks, and the grace to share it with people who needed it most. Rachel Morrison had done all that. The broke paramedic who'd been evicted, who'd worked 60-hour weeks, who'd struggled to feed her daughter, she'd transformed into something more. Not just wealthy, but purposeful. Not just successful, but meaningful. She'd become the woman Dorothy had dreamed of, the guardian who finally set the treasure free. And as Rachel walked back to the farmhouse, the bees sang their ancient song, a humming that spoke of patience, persistence, and the quiet work that changes everything. They protected the secret for decades. They guided Rachel to it. And now they witnessed what she'd built with it. A farm that thrived, a community that prospered, a legacy that would endure. Because Rachel had learned what few people ever understand, that the greatest treasures aren't found in darkness. They're revealed in light, and they grow not when they're hoarded, but when they're shared. That was the real magic of the Chun Honey Farm. Not the fortune hidden in the Queen's chamber, but the transformation that happened when someone brave enough to claim an impossible inheritance chose to turn it into an impossible blessing. Rachel had done that, and the bees, ever wise, had known she would all along. The end. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.